It's Ada Betsabe, but you can call her Ada. Welcome to the Latin selection. How are you?
Hey, Han, how are you? I'm well. Thanks so much for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
Good, I'm good, thank you. So, the first thing I want to talk about with you is music. Obviously, um, you have been so you haven't released an EP, is it since 2020?
Yes.
Correct? Masterpiece. Am I correct in my? Okay.
Yes, girl, you did your research.
I did, I did. And you've done a few features in the last year, and you've just released a new single, Ahora Que. It's about that latest single and how it came together.
Yeah, awesome. I definitely will share a little bit of that journey. It was actually very unplanned, just how everything came together. So in 2020, I released my album Masterpiece, 10-track album, where I explore or journey with the concept of being a masterpiece or a work in progress that will one day be seen as a masterpiece, but can be perceived as messy or not put together yet. And just finding beauty in that concept. Um, I based most of that on Ephesians 2:10, where it says that we're God's workmanship created for the good works he prepared for us before the foundations of the earth, and just like traveling with the concept of contentment in the midst of process, right? And so that was Masterpiece. And then after, which I find super interesting, God always confronts me through what I create. So after I finished that project, I'm being confronted with the thought of the things that I need to work through personally, because obviously music puts you in front of a lot of people and it's amazing and it's awesome and I have no complaints. But then, you're done with the concert and you go home and you realize you still have these struggles that you've yet to be free from, or these things that you still doubt and battle with. And so Lord just really confronts me and says, are you willing to commit to yourself in your process the way that you want others to? And so, of course, I agree. It wasn't like a yes right away, but I definitely got to the yes. And then I traveled to California. I'm from Boston, so 7-hour flight. I don't know. You don't have those in England because everything's close by.
Everything's like 2 hours and you're in Spain, 2 hours
Yeah, exactly.
Eastern
Which
Europe. Like,
I
yeah,
I love that, right? But for us, like when you think of moving from one coast to the other, it's literally like culture shock and just all the things. So I moved there to go to ministry school, which is why I haven't released another body of work. I had been studying for 2 years at Bethel School of Ministry,
I thought
and
so. I was like, because you're in Reading, right?
I am no longer there. We just finished second year in
Okay.
May of this year. Yeah. But yeah, I
You
wasn't
back in
there.
Boston permanently for now.
Girl, permanently is a strong word.
It's okay. We're all trying to leave where we come from.
Permanently. Yeah, yeah, Boston is hometown, but I haven't even been here for the last 3 months. I've been traveling and all that. So anyway, ahora que, let's get on that. So ahora que comes about right when I decide to move. So 2020, I dropped Masterpiece, COVID hits, everything shut down. There's no touring, there's no anything. I'm home, I'm anxious, I'm freaking out. I need to go outside. And then the Lord's like, you're gonna go outside, but it's because you're gonna go move like to a whole new place. And so Masterpiece drops May, and by September, I'm moving across the country and entering into this new season of absolutely no productivity for me musically or even just producing financially, because the Lord was like, I need your undivided attention. And so here I am at this school, right, where I'm just attending and being ministered to and learning, growing. But right in the midst of that, my sister actually lost her baby. And so I had such a battle and just wrestled with the inability that I found within myself to believe God for a miracle in the midst of the pain. I had never really had a loss that close to me. And I really just, you think of how you'd act if something happens, and then it happens and you realize that you are far from that, right? And so here I am, like shouting from the rooftops about this God that I believe that can move mountains. And then I'm holding my nephew in my arms and I'm just like sobbing because I have no faith to trust or believe that he could raise him, right? And that really confronted me. And I started to write ahora que. Ahora que means now what? And what I'm essentially saying there, obviously it's in Spanish, but what I'm essentially saying there is, now what? Like what happens when you don't get the miracle? What happens when you don't see the victory? What happens when you don't trust? Will you choose to actually have faith in the midst of that? And why would we need faith if we always had things work out? And I actually wrestled with that concept for about a year and a half, and I wrote the song over the course of that year and a half. And the song ends with a kind of like pick a side, like what are you gonna do? Are you gonna go this way or that way? But I had to actually travel with that and get to that place before I could release. And it was actually it's not a song that anyone in my team that you asked was like, don't release that song. It's not a single. It's not radio friendly. It's not this, but I had to release it for myself because I knew that the journey I had been on was so alive and so genuinely just authentic to my walk and the walk that many of us have, because come on, how many of us haven't lost someone in the last couple years, or at least we saw death get closer to us than it had ever been, right? Someone that next thing you know, it's like, oh, my best friend's cousin died, and you're like, well, I was with them last week, and it's like we just saw how close um the other side is, right? And so that's Ahora Que. Love that song. It just makes me think, even today, right? Even this morning, I was like thinking of, God, what does it look like to have faith in this space that I'm in today? So that's what I was like dying to tell you because I know that you listen to the music and I don't
Yeah.
know how much Spanish you understand, but I was like, I need to tell them what this is
Listen,
about.
I go with my Google Translator and I sit and I pray and I say, God, you carved out this lane, we'll figure it out. That's what I do.
Speak to
Um,
my spirit, Lord.
exactly. And then obviously, so some of the features, I mean, last week you were on Lizzie and Angel's EP Cielo. You did a Spanglish thing for them. You're on Kings and Queens. You did a feature with Destiny. So what's it been like collaborating, through a pandemic and just having all these opportunities to work with amazing people?
It's been awesome. I've been collaborating with a lot of people that I consider friends, and that was always my dream when I started doing this thing. Like, I wanted to meet people and just know them outside of their talent. And I feel super privileged these days because I've been developing these relationships over the past 6, 7 years. And it was never like with this agenda, right? Of, oh, I'm going to be your friend so that we can collaborate. But then these are people who, have just been so committed to the purpose that God's placed on their lives through this talent, right? That it's only a matter of time, right? Until they start to see this traction. And so here I am coming out of a 2 year hiatus, coming out of a global pandemic, and I'm faced with the biggest feature of my life, uh, of my career, right? Which was Kings and Queens. And then Lisi Parra and I have become closer in the last few months just as I've been in Dominican Republic. So we have like the proximity to actually see one another more. And um, just like having the opportunity to work with people that I know, I don't know, there's just something about that. I don't really have the words for it, but it's been amazing. Nico M and I, we've been doing music together since way, way, way back, way, way back. And I will actually be on his new album that will drop September 2nd, I believe it is. He's releasing his new album, Temporadas, which means seasons. And I'm one of the features on there. We shot a video for the song, so you'll see me on that. Just did the song with Lisi and Angel, which was great too. I love R&B, so that was like an R&B vibe. I got to like really feel the R&B Ada that grew up listening to, the Boys to Men's and the all these R&B groups. So yeah, it's been nice. The pandemic obviously puts a dent on videos. We're kind of on the other side now, so I can just come to them. I live in America, so I can travel most places fairly quickly, inside, in Latin America. And so I just kind of come and shoot the videos and spend time with their kids and eat their food, and it's great.
I love that. What are you working on as Ada? So do you have anything that's like in the pipeline that's cooking that you can share?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So I I think sometimes I have it a little harder. I can have it easier, right, in a way, but it's also harder depending on how you look at it. So I'm bilingual and I take pride in creating music that is Spanglish, right? So you're running into a random 4-bar section in the middle of a verse where I'm rapping in English and then the rest of the song is in Spanish, or you're faced with a Spanish hook for a song that's completely in English. Like a song like that would be Way Too Many, which is like super English and Spanish, but you hear it and you think it's gonna be completely in English, and then I start rapping in Spanish. It's just like, okay. So I get really excited about that. But I also feel like sometimes it's harder for me because I have so many opportunities, right? And so it's about really getting with God and asking him what are the doors that he's opening and what are the permissible things that I could do and would be amazing, but then again, it will take time and energy that I would rather put towards the thing that is the thing, right? So I have a bunch of ideas, but one thing I know that is on God's heart for me this season is this project called The End is Near, El fin se acerca. And I've been working on this project for about a year and a half now. I have some big hitter features on there, like Nathan el Profeta. I have Manny Montes, a couple of English Christian hip hop cats that I'm not gonna mention now, but because I need to get those vocals first, you know what I'm saying? But I have a few like really cool collaborations, and more than that, like I'm collaborating with God, I'm creating with God in this project because I know that I try to do that all the time, but for this project specifically, it's such a bold kind of intentional, hey, the end is near. Like in case you were wondering, I want you guys to not wonder. Like don't tell me that no one told you because it's the name of my album, you know? And in that project I explore what it's like to be living in this time. Um, just literally swimming against the current of the world and establishing some truths like sin is still sin, even if it's legal, it's still sin. Even if our governments are legalizing it, it's still sin. All right. And the wages of it will still be death. And so just really just a very personal, but also I think it's the first project. I take pride in making very personal music, but I think this is the first project where it's personal, but also like a corporate thing at the same time.
Mm.
And so I'm really, really excited about it.
I just feel like I got the biggest exclusive of my little Spanglish radio show, so I'm happy. That's amazing. I'm excited. Do you have a date for like or a rough timeline for when it's
I don't have a date
gonna?
for you, girl.
Okay. So the next thing I want to talk about is the Spanglish market. Um, I would say that you've carved out your own lane in the Christian Spanish world, but you cross over with English, obviously because both cultures are part of your upbringing. I feel like the word pioneer comes to mind for you, for Nico, for you, there's a few of you, Angie, just a few people who are really like bridging the gap between culture, like both cultures,
Yeah.
and bringing it into the mainstream Christian space. So my questions kind of around that for you are what do you love about it? What does the crossover in culture mean to you? And what does it mean to you to be able to represent like both the Hispanic culture and then also the US culture?
Wow, that's a loaded question. I love that question. I love that this is a question. You know what I mean? Because it wasn't ever gonna, at one point, it was just not a conversation topic. One thing I love about this uh market, I like to call it land because it's literally just untapped land, unconquered land. I see it as just God gracing us to see enemies and teaching us to fight the wars that will defeat those enemies so that we can conquer that land for his glory, right? And so I believe that one of the biggest struggles of our generation is identity. We struggle with understanding that we are more than what we do. and more than what we produce. And I've struggled deeply with identity, because I've had a lot of just situations that happened to me during my childhood and late childhood that really challenged my belief of self and my belief in self, right? And so that does not that's not exempt from ethnicity, especially being a first generation American, being born in the Dominican Republic, immigrating to the United States at the age of 3, which is old enough for me to know that I have another culture, but not old enough to even understand the other culture, right? Um, and then I'm raised into, just a diverse community of just a melting pot of all cultures, but I'm adjusting to what American culture essentially is, right? And so like the go get it education, living in Boston, like it's all about, you got to get as many degrees as you possibly can because that's just the way you're gonna get out there in life. And I have absolutely nothing against organized education, right? But I think that if we find worth and value in that, just like everything else, it's it's almost like this rat race that just never ends, right? And so all that to say, I really enjoy the space I'm in because I understand that there are things that you can only teach by modeling, right? And so I grew up speaking Spanish to my mom and English to my sisters and my dad, and she would like be mad at me in Spanish and I would respond in English, and then it would be like talk to me in Spanish because like you're going to be worth two people when you go to work because when you grow up you're going to get a job because you speak two languages. And so she's like, you need to keep your Spanish, and just struggling with that, and then just growing into the space of like, I don't care. Like, I'm gonna be who I am, and I don't care if it's not marketable. And I was told by people when I began that I had to pick a side, and that was prior to Despacito. That was prior to Beyonce and Justin Bieber singing in Spanish. And here I was like, bro, I'm writing a song and I can't really get it out. And like what I want to say, I can't get it out in Spanish because I'm thinking it in English, but this hook, it just sounds like it needs to be in Spanish. I don't know why. And like I'm thinking in two languages. And finally, just discovering that niche that really values what we do. And also like I love that I'm getting a culture, obviously the niche, right? But then there are those who don't speak any Spanish and are like, I'm learning Spanish with your music. And then the people that don't speak any English and they're like, oh, like you got English in there. Like that's really cool. What are you saying? And they're curious. And so I enjoy it. I love it. I would not, girl, I've done projects that are completely in English or like completely in Spanish, and none of them have ever dropped. Um, there are challenges, right? Because you want to be taken seriously by both, right? And the cultures are very different. So, like in Latin America, a lot of people still collaborate based on heart. Just, I really believe in your ministry and I want to do a song with you. Here are the vocals. In the American side, it's all very organized, right? Because it's been going, and you got people winning Grammys for this, right? So you don't even get to the person. You want to do a feature with like a Lecrae or like an Andy Mineo, and like just the way there is, so you have to have the right relationships to even get there. And there's fees involved. And so, and I'm not that's a good thing, right? I get it, but you just have to know how to carry yourself in both spaces. You can't come into the American world talking about, hey, let's do this for the love. Like, where's my money? You go to the Latin space, and I've actually had features where I've come like, hey, what's your fee? And I've had the artist tell me like, I really believe in you, like you're insulting me by offering me money. And so it's very interesting, right? But I love it. I would not trade
That's
it.
a juxtaposition that I think people don't know about. Just think that there's something that's kind of brewing, and I feel like we're on the cusp of it, and I feel like the two are going to work together. I don't think there has to be a compromise of like,
Yeah,
oh, let's do the organized music industry English route, or the Spanish kind of just doing Spanish. Like you can mix and do both and it works.
yeah,
And I think that just comes with like the evolution of society and like people's minds being more open. But I think it's going to take time, but I think we will get there. um
yeah. I agree with you. And I think just to add to that, because I just want you to know I'm mad deep. I'm super deep. Everything for me just
Same though.
is like
I was
deeper
gonna
than
ask you, what are you on the Enneagram? Because I feel like we might be the same if you
I'm
maybe
an 8 wing 7.
oh, interesting. So I'm a
Are
one
you a
wing
4?
two. No, I'm a
Oh,
one.
you're a 1 wing 2. Okay, okay. I like ones. I have some ones in my life, but twos and ones I tend to
Mm,
have like really good connections with,
yeah,
and fours as well.
yeah.
I believe that, even behind like the basic just concept of sound and melody and all that, words are spirit, right? And music is essentially a tool that we use to shift atmospheres. And so I believe that with the increasingly dark music industry, secular music industry, um, we have been given a almost like a free pass into places, right? That we would otherwise never be allowed into. And it's people's homes that really desire peace, people's homes that really desire joy, people's homes that are full of chaos and are just seeking clarity. Um, and what they're consuming, which is what's being fed to them because, this is what's in front of them and they don't choose for themselves most of the time. Half of the time, they're not even aware that they're allowed to choose, right? Is not helping with, their case. And so the Christian industry or the Christian artists, creatives, we have a responsibility to bring everything that we are, not just our talent, but also the light that we are into these spaces. And so that is why, one of the reasons why I think the English and Spanish industries are doing this. And it's actually God is using people like myself, Nico, and others, Angie, to bridge it by modeling it. But we're not even bridging it. We're just letting people see something that wasn't there. You know what I'm saying? Because
Okay, so the next thing I wanted to discuss with you was deconstructing faith because I feel like you're someone who can speak to that, your life experience, your story,
Mhm,
just even like I think there's a certain amount of theology and smarts and wits that you've got. That's the vibe that I pick up from you, um, and I think that's through years of experience and through just like actually, um, I don't know,
mhm.
just being submitted to the Holy Spirit and just really taking that time to say your will over my way. So that's something that I think you can speak to. So you were a PK, right?
Yeah.
Also a
Mhm.
PK, so I relate. So could you just talk a little bit about growing up as a pastor's kid and how that kind of impacted your life? Good and bad. Yeah.
I love that you said deconstructing. I've never been asked that question, but I've heard so many people
It's
like,
just your story feels like a deconstruction of faith because
yeah,
and I think it's something you can speak to beautifully. And I think it's something that a lot of people do and they don't even realize they're doing it until they come out.
exactly. That's what I was
Yeah.
gonna get at. I've heard the term, right? And so, but I've never labeled it my journey as that. But what like deconstructing is what breaking down into smaller parts, right? To further understand, um, like the origin or the cause of something. I think that my personal opinion about deconstructing faith is that, we can deconstruct our belief systems, but we can never, ever fall into the mistake of trying to deconstruct God because he was not a construct. He's not a
Mm,
construct, so we
so
cannot
good.
deconstruct something that was not made, right?
Yeah.
And that is the source of all things. And so I think that my journey was more of the latter, right? I actually knew uh, God according to what, I was taught. And so I didn't come from a super legalistic church. My father was a pastor who was a second generation pastor. And he grew up in a legalistic environment and he had such a desire to not be that, right? And so he wanted to form or create a space for grace and for, just the gospel to be all that it is, right? And not just the box that it was put in. However, I believe strongly that we need teams. Like we need to do everything we do. It's even God himself is a team, right? Like he's like, I love teamwork so much that I'm gonna make I am three in one, right? And so I really enjoy um speaking about the process that I went through because it taught me so much about God without like saying God. If does that make sense? Like I unlearned who I thought God was. Um my father's environment, he had all the best intentions, but he was isolated, right? And so when you're isolated, you have no accountability. And so it can take a turn at any minute. It can take a sharp left or a sharp right at any minute. And so, especially when you're gifted and you have the ability to persuade and to speak. And so we went through various challenges as a family where we were faced with now this almost cult like kind of we're gonna narrow in on one thing, and like it sucks because you're like, yo, I just became, and I'm sure, I know I have a really good relationship with my father now, and we've talked about this, like you get to the point where you're like, whoa, like I became exactly what I didn't want to become. Like I focused my energy so much on not being something that now I'm just that. I've discovered a new way to be that, and so I love the journey that God allowed me to be on because I unlearned who he wasn't and learned who he is. And the the key word for me is always and will always be love. Like just love. God is love. And but love doesn't look the same in every season, right? So when a child is if your child is a year old, 2 years old, love is like, well, I have a baby niece now and she's a month old. She's the cutest thing ever. And my sister has to like literally, my sister tells me, she's like, we have this tiny human that we have to keep alive. And I'm like, it sounds funny, but you're keeping this girl alive. Like if you don't feed her, if you don't, she cannot fend for herself, right? And so love looks like that in this season. But if she was 20, and she wanted her mom to be, at her beck and call with a bottle every 2 hours, that would not be the way to love her, right? Because in that moment, loving her is saying, hey, you need to get off of your back and go to the
Mm.
fridge and get your food. And so,
Love is discipline sometimes.
exactly. And love evolves with you, it grows with you,
Mm.
right? And so I think my journey with God was one of me discovering him as love in the season I was in. He loved me to repentance. And once I repented, he loved me to deliverance. And once was delivered, he's loving me in the process of now trusting that he will return to me the things that the enemy stole from me when I was in that space, right? But now this season of love is a season of more faith than anything, right? Because now it's requiring something of me. Now it's not just me receiving, it's now me saying, I want to love you back and I want to love you well. And so I think the core value that I live by in this season specifically is that value of faith, of just the faith that works through love, right? So because you loved me, I love you back. You loved me when I didn't know how to love. And so I have faith that, yo, if you hooked it up when I was not even interested, um, you would like even more now, you know what I'm saying? Even more now, you would come into my life and you would sort through the things that I'm sorting and working through in this season. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's what I got.
Absolutely. The thing that came to my head was that kind of I don't know if you've had this expression or turn of phrase of like God meets you and loves you where you are, but he also loves you too much to leave you there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so another part is that you also there was a season in your life where you walked away from the faith, and something I'm kind of interested in talking to you more about is the fact that you explored different religious practices,
Yeah.
or like you're dabbling with New Age, all of that. So can you just speak to that time in specifically in those things and what you kind of saw after and what was it that you were seeking, and what didn't you find that you could only find through Christ? If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Yeah, I didn't have a very good um just connection with spirituality, or I didn't quite understand what it meant to be a spiritual a being, a spirit, because we are, right? We live in this body, and this body will return to the ground, and we will still exist. Um, but I think that my journey with that, I have to dig back a little bit. This is a sidebar. I have to say this because I always stand by this. One of the things I learned in exploring other religions is that we as humans, we tend to seek out the religion that will help me fill whatever void I got or meet whatever need I have, but that requires the least amount of commitment from me, right? Or sacrifice. And so it's not that people don't want eternal life or Jesus or the peace and the joy, it's that the way there includes carrying a cross. And so
I've
it's a
literally got Matthew 16:24 for the end of this conversation, so we'll
wow,
get there. We'll get there.
we're going, right? And so this season of my life was I was very like kind of not super hands-on. I was very distantly exploring things and just trying to understand why people would resort to these things. And it's this like human will of like, I want what I want and I want to get it the way I want to get it. And if you say that I have to go down this path, well, no, I'm going to find another path. And we try to find all these paths to God, right? And so in that relationship, I remember just like exploring Buddhism and like the practice, and there are so many things that are truth, right? Or that are universal laws, like the practice of mindfulness, like, oh, just take a moment to just think about what you're grateful for and do that every morning. And I actually I work with people that are in the industry, like brain development industry. And so I don't know if it's an industry, but go with this. So they constantly chat on like developmental milestones for children and all this. I love science, by the way. I'm just like super into science. And so as I'm listening to them chat, I'm like, wow, if only we knew that some of these things that are given to us as religious practices are actually just God. He made our body a certain way. And so our brains release these chemicals when we practice these things, right? So you go for a jog, you get all these reward chemicals, you come home, you feel great, you know what I'm saying? And so we have these religions that say, well, sit there and practice mindfulness and like, whoever God is gonna like bless you. And it's like, dude, like, no, that's just taking care of your body. Like that's just guarding your temple. You know what I'm saying? The temple of the Holy Spirit. Like I need to take care of my mental health. And so I think that the church, this is going on a tangent, but I'm going to go with this because I feel the presence of God. I
Yeah,
think
for
that
it.
the church sometimes shunning science and shutting out the truth that is, God's made our bodies to heal itself. He's given us tools. That's actually opened up a door for the enemy to introduce practices that are occult, like, oh, well, get a rose quartz and put it around your bed and it's going to help your heart chakra, do this and that. And like people are submitting to all these things when in reality, like we didn't have to get a cult with it. Like it could have just been something that we're not going to bow our knee to, but that we understand that is a working part of the universe, and the
Mhm.
universe is a created thing. There was a creator that made it this way. Why? Maybe we should talk to him and ask him why. And so I think that for me, that journey was actually very necessary. I don't think everyone needs to go through that, but for me, like being in that space, I learned what I didn't know existed, right? And then it actually made me turn and say, oh, well, then there must be light. If there's darkness, there must be light. And then I ran to the light, right? But yeah, wow, I'm so glad you asked that question. I've never, ever talked about that in an interview. And I love just shining a light on that because as you can tell, I'm so passionate about mental health. I'm passionate about um, just getting rid of the clutter and the chaos, and I follow a lot of like neuroscientists and just people who actually went to school for this stuff and can explain it. And a lot of them are coming to Christ. Like they're going into these studies and they're figuring out with science that we have a soul and that, when you pray, there's like all these things happening in your brain. And so, yeah, the occult is a no-go. No one, like, I do not recommend. 0 stars, would not recommend.
Oh, I love this. So you were talking about mental health. So I want to, in this moment, just can we normalize the conversation around mental health, around physical health, and how
Yeah,
also spiritual health,
yeah,
therapy, all of the things that the church, maybe, let's pray it away. Sometimes you just need to talk to someone in a safe environment who can psychologically and scientifically explain
yeah.
actually the reason you're feeling that way is a chemical imbalance, or it doesn't mean that you don't love God, or the way that you feel, it doesn't make you a bad Christian, because I feel like
Hmm.
that's a misconception. And I feel like maybe that also sometimes leads people to go on a path of deconstructing their faith, because they're like, well, if God is good and God is sovereign, why do these bad things, the big questions, why do bad
Exactly.
things happen to good people, all of
Yeah.
that. So could you just speak to that?
Yeah, definitely. So one thing I always uh, try to take into consideration when I chat with um, just people that I meet through the music and that are super inspired or just like really love what I am bringing to the table, and they open up to me, right? Because they feel connected to me because they've heard my story through my songs. And now I'm meeting them for the first time, but they don't feel like they're meeting me for the first time, right? And so we have these conversations that get really deep really quickly. And you don't even gotta like push too many buttons for me because I just get deep right away, right? But in these conversations, I recall just having seeing like patterns, right? And then I started to explore really tactfully, right? Because you never want someone to feel like you're trying to fix them, right? I can't even fix myself. But just really tactfully explore what were the adverse childhood experiences that this person may have had, right? And so our belief in God is shaped through the experiences we have, especially when we can't make sense of a book with 66 books and all these words that sometimes, depending on the version, I don't even know what they mean. Um, so we have these belief systems that we create or generate based on, there's the what we're taught, but also like what we absorb, right? Our environment. And one thing I've tried to do is to just explore those things with people, because in therapy, which I subscribe to therapy. Yes, 5 stars. Please go to therapy, people.
Therapy
Um,
5 stars.
yeah, therapy and Jesus.
New
Like,
age 0. You heard it here.
yeah, like 0 stars for the occult, 5 stars for therapy. Find a Christian therapist. It's awesome. Um, I I realized that culturally, we are oftentimes taught to just push things under the rug, and so like you said earlier, you said, why do good, or if God is good, why do bad things happen? And it's a question we all have. Not only that, once we sort through that, right? The question is this: when the bad things happened, what was I left with, right? And so, am I living out of what I've constructed because of my situation or that happened to me or happened with me? Or am I living from a place of truth? Right? Because everything that stems from everything born of the spirit is life and peace, right? Everything born of the flesh is just going to bring you death, destruction, all the things, negative things. And so oftentimes we're in this cloud of negativity, but we don't understand why we're so drained and why we're so this. And it's because we haven't processed and really sorted through some of the things that we're gonna experience pain. Like we're on a fallen
In
planet.
this
Like
day and age, like you said, the end is near.
exactly. And we're on a fallen planet with a bunch of fallen people that have a nature that was shifted from a nature of righteousness to a nature of sin. And half of them, if not more, don't even know it. And so, hello, like it's out there. It's gonna happen. And so we need to have better systems, not we can't sit here and pretend that we can just eradicate all pain, but we need to
Right.
understand how to process pain better, how to have a better like reflex to pain so that we're not dragging generational trauma for 5 generations and then, wondering, whatever many years later why all of our the men in our family are this way or all the women are this or whatever. It's like
And then why do you
somewhere
pick
along the
those
line.
people, or why do those patterns show up in certain areas of your life?
Exactly. And so and that's where that is where my relationship with, the spiritual world and science connects because we often hear, oh, generational curses, right? What I hear is generational trauma.
Right.
Like, oh, well, just pray a prayer and like you're gonna be free. Your dad was a drunk, his dad was a drunk, and you've been drinking. Oh, look, God, we just set you free. And it's like, well, but why don't we explore why? And
Mm.
why don't we see the patterns? And why don't we actually uproot the thing, you know what I'm saying, that caused this? And so, girl, I can go on and on about this topic because I'm so passionate. I've seen God set me free through science. I always tell people that God used science to set me free. He used science to deliver me. He used science to return to me my identity and what was rightfully mine that the enemy tried to steal through trauma and through insecurity and through rejection and abandonment and just really messed up like my ability to connect with people in general, especially men, but just people in general. And so, girl, I'm still on the journey. I do not think I've arrived anywhere, but I can definitely say that I've seen so many positive relationships and life-giving spaces that God's trusted me with in this season and in the last like 4 or 5 years that I'm like, yo, this thing works. Like it actually works. But
Of
yeah,
course.
does that answer your question?
It does. It's
Okay.
so something else kind of based off what you've said. I think, this is why the art of storytelling is what I love. It's communication, it's people sharing their experiences, giving people that space because you don't know how this is going to help or impact someone. So,
Yeah.
what's one thing or one way that science and God have come together to set you free?
Growing up, I was kind of like a very unpredictable kid when it came to my temper, right? I would have these moments where I just would have a moment, and it was the most unexpected moment. And so I never quite understood why that was that way, why I felt like my emotions would control me instead of me actually being in control of them. And my my family, Latino Caribbean families, like they're just like she's just crazy. She crazy. There is no other explanation. Like you're crazy and like you need to get beat because if you get beat, it's gonna help. Like you're gonna beat me. I'm gonna be even more angry. Now I'm gonna be angry at you because you beat me. And so one thing that God in science, one way that God in science met for me was in therapy. I explored that anger was actually just like a superficial emotion that was hiding the pain or the sadness or the disappointment or the anxiety or whatever the actual feeling was, right? And so through therapy, I was able to explore how to not be triggered and kind of like automatically catapulted, but to actually stop when I'm being triggered, acknowledge that I'm being triggered by this situation, and then explore what I actually feel. And that helped me really restore my relationships with family, like especially with my father, my mother, because I had so many things just bottled up, right? And I got to not only share it in therapy in a safe space, but then my prayer life changed because now I was able to pray with more honesty, right? Now I wasn't just praying like, oh God, I'm so sorry that I like just snapped on someone yesterday, but now I'm praying and saying, God, I snapped on this person because I feel so disappointed because they lied to me. And I pray that you would make my heart more compassionate, that I would seek out why they're lying and I would be able to sit there. But I also pray that you would help me heal with the disappointment and give me discernment so that I'm not trusting all of me to someone who's lying to me, right? And so this is where I feel like these things met for me. Communicating with God was extremely improved when I start to communicate my feelings with a therapist and with just friends. I think safe spaces, it doesn't always have to be,
Mhm.
you don't always have to pay for an hour every time, but just having safe spaces, creating those safe spaces
Mhm.
as well.
Okay, so now I'm kind of gonna go into like church, ministry, community.
Yeah.
Um, so something that a phrase that came to me when I was kind of, you know, doing my research and everything was um the place that hurt you is also the place that healed you, as in the church.
Yeah.
So could you just speak to church hurt and then speak about how you found restoration through community?
I believe that the church is a place for broken people
Mm,
and it's a hospital for broken people. And so you're bound to run into some broken people. And if your church doesn't have any broken people, the day you walk in, the day I walk in, it now has broken people, right? Because we all have parts of us that have yet to be um, restored, right? And so I guess my journey with church hurt and church healing I have to mention just community. It has a lot to do with community, like-minded individuals, belonging, right? Feeling like you belong. Um, I think my deepest pain with the church was the isolation that I dealt with because we were a church that was independent and obviously came out of an association of churches and kind of went on its own. So we already had a bunch of people that were like, we don't like you because you left us, right? And just the feeling of rejection and isolation. And then not only just feeling rejection, but there's something that happens when you feel rejection and then you make rejection your home, right? And now all of a sudden, rejected is your name instead of child of God or
mm,
worker of the kingdom or, minister of the Bible, of the word. Like now it's rejected, right? And so then you walk around with that label until someone comes and tells you, hey, you're walking around like you're rejected, but I see a princess, I see a queen, I see a royal. And so that's where I felt like healing came to me, where I was able to put myself in an environment where people would embrace me for not what I do or what I did right or wrong or what was done to me, but just who I am, right? And so I that's why I always say, hey, the church that hurts you heals you. And I always tell my youth, I'm like, keep yourself aware. Keep yourself aware that, you know, everyone that's around you is just on the same journey you're on, figuring it out like you. Don't ever hold someone up way too high. Even those that have leadership giftings and callings, like those, you need to pray for them even
yeah,
more. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Because they're dealing with things that you're not probably not dealing with.
right. About okay, yeah. So Jackie Hill Perry, she also said something about this about how like church is basically just like broken. Like when we have church, it's broken expectation. Because we go in there looking for healing, we go in there looking for like whatever through God and through His people. But like you said, it's literally a bunch of hurt people. So everyone's collectively coming together and receiving that healing through the love of God, and it
Yeah.
happens together, but it doesn't happen necessarily through people. If that makes sense.
Yes, it
Yeah,
makes a lot of sense. And I
yeah.
agree
So
100% with that.
I just think what you said just kind of reminded me of that. And something else. So you went on a missions trip to Colombia, is that correct? A few
Yes.
years ago. And that was like where God really like spoke to you. Is that am I right in saying all of these things?
Yes, you are. That was my first ever mission trip.
Right. Uh, so in that experience, that's when God said that, like, this little rapping thing that you got going on, I'm going to use that to speak to people. Um, so could you just talk about that experience and also just about how, like, I guess your obedience in that season kind of led you to like now being like Ada that we all know and love, the rapper, who has like all these cool
Yeah.
opportunities. Yeah.
Yeah, so I went on this mission trip running away from, I don't want to make it seem like it was only about that, but I was definitely, I felt safe there. I said, this is not an industry thing. I'm literally going to the streets of Colombia, like random place. No one knows me. Like no one's gonna, I can just go out there. I can just enjoy because I really love what I do. I love music. It's a part of me, right? And so I had stopped making music because I got out of the secular world. I had found Jesus, or Jesus found me, right? And I just said I would never make music again. I was faced with way too many dark things. And I was shook. I was shook. I was like, I ain't going back over there. Like there's no amount of money they could pay me. And I just wanted to live a low key life. So I go on this mission trip. I'm in this first love space. Um, and then God encountered me, girl. Like he encountered me through street ministry, because there were so many people that like I'm here thinking, okay, no one knows me, and like I'm just gonna go and be a fly on the wall and do my thing and go home. And then I start sharing stories, and there's so many people that relate to them. And then it kind of returned purpose to me because it showed me the purpose behind what we do, why I'm using this talent, because I had lost the essence of it. I was doing it for the wrong reasons, for a long time. And so this was such an inspiring trip. About, I want to say, a month prior to the trip, I had gone to a Power and Love conference. I don't know if you know who Todd White is. Todd White is a minister. His ministry is called Lifestyle Christianity, and he focuses on equipping Christians to live a lifestyle of just the supernatural. So he's constantly like, if you're at the store buying your lunch, like if ask the Lord, like, Lord, give me a word for this person, and just go and encourage them. It doesn't need to be a prophetic. It could be like a Bible verse. It could be, but like just get out there, like go get out of your comfort zone. And I had gone to his conference, and then I go to this mission trip, and I had no idea that I was going to feel so compelled to utilize some of the tools. So here I am in the middle of Colombia, just middle of the street, rapping, and not next thing you know, I'm praying for people. And I had only been saved a very short time. So it was also deconstructing some of the things I was taught that like for God to use you, you had to be this like 30-year-old, like you had to have like a degree in like theology and all these things, and pay your dues and prove that you're actually saved. And here I am, like I would say now I was kind of like barely saved because I love Jesus and I wanted to pursue him, but I was still holding on to a whole lot of things that I did
Right.
not want to let go of. And yet God saw past that, and
Mhm.
he allowed me to see him at work. And that girl, like that's the rest is history. I fell in love with it. That's actually when I fell in love with this. I was like, wow, this is more than, man, I thought I had this little thing in my hands, but this is actually bigger than I thought it was.
So good. Um, so I feel like all of that has led you to the point, like you said, of where you are now, which feels like a call to ministry. Um, is that something that you denied for a while in your life?
Oh yeah. Come
Yeah.
on, you're a pastor's kid. You know this. What I did think was, yo, like what if I want to be on like the traveling circus? Like what if I want to be the furthest thing from ministry? And what I've come to now is that when you have a call in your life and God's hands on your life, it's less about you doing that and making that happen and more about the fact that your DNA has been flooded with that. So anything that I put my hands to, when I was doing secular music, what I created was ministering to people. It wasn't maybe ministering the gospel, but it
Mhm.
was definitely touching their hearts and really sorting, right? Ministry administration. I don't know if it comes from that word, but it's kind of like putting everything in where it belongs, right? All of a sudden they're finding clarity through what I'm sharing. And here I am talking about like just irrelevant stuff, right? So yeah, I definitely ran from it. Now I run towards it.
Mm,
I really do run towards it
great.
now.
And where can people find you on social?
Find me at ADABETSABE on Instagram, Facebook, all the things.
Smashed it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Hannah. I appreciate you.
You too.
Bye.